Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComms, networking, and the various other websites. You will find a lot of information resource at those websites and lots of videos at NetworkPharma TV and so on. So follow hashtag MedComms and you can keep up with what's going on. Look at the websites. You'll find lots of content. You'll find hundreds of videos at NetworkPharma TV, many of which have been generated from webinars like this. And I love these webinars. The technology means we can bring in people from around the world and importantly, audiences from around the world. And we've got hundreds of you today, which is brilliant to see. And we're going to talk about the 2024 Code of Practice, which has just been launched this week. So Jayne, huge kudos to you for jumping online with me. We've done this a couple of times before, but let's just make the point to everybody. The code has just been launched. You're just getting to grips with it. This is a top line. We won't know all the answers necessarily. You're very happy to hear from people afterwards and so on. But it's really, really useful. And as I say, you've done it a couple of times before, coming online and telling us what the immediate things are that we should be thinking about in MedCom. So thank you. We're going to hear your presentation. We then have an opportunity for some Q&A. On that note, Jayne, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and crack on with your presentation.
So fantastic. Thank you very much. Right, let's just share these slides here. Okay, perfect. So first of all, Peter, thank you so much. Gosh, we do these crazy sessions, don't we? You know, something hits and we're, yeah, let's do a session, just me and you having a chat. And how many have we got? Hundreds on the session. So I'm delighted to be here, totally delighted. If we haven't met before, then I'm an award-winning ABPI Code of Practice trainer. I work with around 150 companies every year, and I have to say a wonderful mix of pharma companies and MedComms and other sort of agencies from a whole wide array of things. Sorts of things I do is predominantly code training. Training is my thing. So all the way from introduction through to expert final signatory, e-learning, monthly cases, whatever you want around your code training, that's what I do. But look, let's focus on this code coming through. Just want to go back for a sec and just talk about the journey that this code has been on. So it feels a long time ago. The consultation was around about Christmas time. It closed at the end of February. And then we've had this massive gap whilst I've been looking at all the comments, getting all their ducks in a row, going back to the MHRA. Finally, in September, after it's been pushed back and back and back, we are now there where it has been approved. And of course, we know that it is now live. I have to giggle. Of course, I'm looking at LinkedIn and seeing what's going on there. There has been lots of debate about what color is the code. Is it orange? Is it peach? Is it sand? I will leave you to debate that. Feel free to put things in the chat if you want to. I'm going to call it orange. And look, this importantly, it comes in and it starts on 1st of October. So just a little point of reminder, really, that what we've got here is don't jump the gun in the few days before the 1st of October. So you have materials, maybe you've switched across to a QR code already. If you make that live today and you've not got the old 2021 provision, then you are heading to a breach. So just take your time with this. And look, with these changes, we've got transition. We've got until the end of December there to work these things through. As I'm going through, just want to say, just don't forget one thing. This information in this recording is correct at the time of recording. So please, it's not a cop-out, but don't use this session alone to make decisions. Reason being, I'm only covering the key takeaways. And also the other big reason is that we've still got a lot more information to come through from the PMCPA to help us unpick this code and the implications of it. So look, if you are trying to figure out what are we doing, what do we need to do? Information is a bit all over the place, if I'm honest. But look, here is what we've got so far when I did these slides. So obviously we've got the 2024 code is out there. They have also launched an interactive version of it, if you prefer that. We've then got a summary of the changes, just the key changes, a press release giving links to various other documents. You've got new guidelines on company procedures, often overlooked, but there's some juicy stuff in there as well. And then they've got some Clause 12 guidance and a bit about the Constitution and the abridged complaints process as well. But look, we're expecting more stuff. So depending what the PMCPA say in their webinars, we're waiting for them to update all their guidance documents, their questions and answers on the PMCPA website. They're going to give us new guidance documents as well. So depending what is going to be in there, subtle things in our interpretation of this might change just subtly. So please bear that in mind. But look, I thought I'd bravely just give you a heads up. What do I personally think about, the new 2024 code that's come in? Personally, and I know a lot of companies are completely in agreement with this one, finally, we've got a bit of modernization through the prescribing information. And I'll tell you more that QR codes, those quick response codes, can be incorporated into some materials, not all, and I'll explain more. What else do I think is good? Now, some people are going to love, some are going to hate this one. We've got a requirement for increased documentation around meeting support. Again, I'll come back to it. But I think it's just really important, and all around transparency as well. They're strengthening that. I think there's a very clear communication from PMCPA, ABPI, all of you that have inputted to this, new version of the code, that transparency of payments, how we're making decisions, who we're supporting, needs to be really thought through. And there's some feedback from audits which have triggered that. What challenges do I think there are? Well, as I say, information is in lots of different places. There is no one-stop source of all the changes. You've got to look across multiple documents. There is no one go-to source. Of course, as Peter intimated at the beginning, there are definitely unanswered questions. I had a quick chat with Alex Fell at the PMCPA earlier in the week. I put some of my questions to him, so it's inevitable that you will have questions. So it's not the full story. Expect grayness is what I can say. And then just on a practical level, oh my word, you lot are all sort of, writers, publishers. So I printed off the code. How small can they make the printed text? Maybe it's just a sign that I need a new pair of glasses. I don't know. But they're obviously looking at, economy of printing. So it is getting smaller and smaller. But, it's much bigger online. I'm sure that's going to be the go-to. So let's just start to have a bit of a dive into this. First of all, why is the code changing? I think it's important that you know that there is no substantial UK or EU law which is triggering this change. There is a minor comment about the good old Windsor framework. But otherwise from that, we get nothing driving the change with law from FPIA, that will come later. So it's really about making sure this code is fit for purpose, looking at some hot topics, strengthening some things, of course, looking at sort of cases where they've been concerned or audits. And so that is what is driving the changes this time. So what I'm going to do is pick on a few clauses which I think are really pertinent to people working in MedComms. The first one is just having a look at clause 5.2. 5.1, I call my smarty clause. They do dish it out on a frequent basis, where companies have failed to maintain high standards. But look, they're just strengthening this in 5.2. They're saying, of course, that all company personnel have got to have a high standard. Amazingly, it just used to be representatives that were called out on this. But no, they now make it totally clear that we are all, caught in this code. And look, that supplementary information there, they are making it absolutely clear that companies are responsible for the actions of all their personnel, so members of their staff. But look, those retained by contract and third parties. So that is going to be a big chunk of you here today. There's no real change around this. It's been in other clauses, but I think it's interesting that they've strengthened it. And so just make sure that you're trained. You got your certificates. It's the same old thing coming through. Proof that as, MedComms, agencies, freelancers, you've got that, knowledge of the code. I just want to segue just very slightly away from the code. This case has been published on Wednesday of this week. And I just think, gosh, this screams the importance and what they are saying in 5.2. It's a case from Bausch and Lomb. They did a voluntary admission where this one sentence absolutely struck me. The agency have apologized to Bausch and Lomb, but there is a breakdown of trust in this relationship. So this is relationship between the agency and the pharma company. And the pharma company are saying explicitly, we can no longer risk working with them for compliance reasons. So if you have any doubt that you don't need code training, look at that case. The numbers down at the bottom there for you and things. And look, a tiny bit of background. I'll cover it in more detail if you're, part of the monthly webinars and things. It was an interesting case. It was a no breach. The agency's contract with Bausch& Lomb ended in 2019, but in July 2023, they decided at the agency to post multiple social media posts across lots of different platforms, celebrating their 20th anniversary. Whilst they were doing that, they were discussing some of their biggest projects. One of their big projects, obviously, was Bausch& Lomb, and they overstepped the mark and they mentioned their particular prescription medicine, and they also said that it was in the area of anaphylaxis. You will know the implications of that, okay? Agency breached their terms of business, used their logo, mentioning the medicine, and they felt obliged to come to the PMCPA and say, look, we had nothing to do with it. But it's just a real reminder on that. So let's have a look. What else has changed? I think if you're there in a meeting space, then there is this one in clause 10.4, just a flag, and this is a new clause requirement. And it's really about the paperwork and the documentation. So support has got a really specific definition. This is when you might take a healthcare professional, and other relevant decision maker, and you are going to support them financially to go to an event or a meeting. So the British Conference of, the American Society of type of meeting. What the requirement now is that there must be a written agreement in place. And so companies have got to document the rationale for the decision of the support being provided. So we've got 2 pointers. So we've got a written agreement, and that is very much focusing on, what are the cost arrangements? What's the agreement in terms of travel, accommodation, that type of thing? You'll find information in the code. But to say, before you've even made that decision, companies got to document the rationale for the decision. Now, talking to companies, most companies are not too concerned about this. I would expect people to be doing this, behind the scenes anyway. But if you're there on the MedComms side, you're facilitating this type of thing, just always check in with the pharma company. Hello, have we got the right documentation now in place before you reach out and sort out travel and registration, that type of thing? So watch out for that new clause requirement there. Now, the big one, which I'm sure everyone is really interested in, which I will spend most of the rest of the time in, is obviously the prescribing information and the obligatory information. So obligatory information is the adverse events. What are we doing with those? We have had quite a shift in the way that you need to think about providing prescribing information. There's a lot that's the same, but there is this lovely new opportunity for some materials to incorporate a QR code, which I think is just going to be great news for the industry, saving time updating, costs, reprinting materials. People have been really positive about this. So this is how I'm describing it, okay? What you now need to do when you're looking at your materials is to think about, right, how are people going to, so what is the material and how are they going to access it? So 12 now splits into 3 different buckets. You've either got printed material, you've either got digital material, which is going to be accessed by the recipient on their own device, and then you've got digital material shown to a recipient in person. I'll include some more examples, in just a moment for you on that and cover that. But what I do want to stress, and I'm sure people are going to have questions on this, the code does not give explicit guidance for all of your scenarios. I actually think it's unrealistic for the code to do that because, it's going to stifle creativity as things go on. So I think what you've got to do is look at this clause pragmatically and think, right, what is going to be the best way to provide the PI and also the obligatory stuff? And I would always say, just think about the PI principles, about what we're trying to achieve, and that might then help you unpick it. So look, this is what I call as my PI principles. They're covered in the code, and I've just sort of grouped them together with you. So there's no change. Look, PI must be provided, but they've tweaked it to say that it's now got to be accessible and called out on all promotional materials, except abbreviated adverts. We've then got to make sure that that PI is easy to access. So they're strengthening the fact that it's got to be obvious on the material. It's got to be clear. It's got to be prominent. I'll give you a few more tips on these as we go through in the detail. And don't forget, this has been with us for a while, but some companies have got this wrong recently through cases, that if you've got a promotional material and there you've got multiple of your medicines on that material, you've got to make sure you've got the PI for all of the medicines which are mentioned in that material. So there's no change, just a little reminder there. Otherwise, again, no change. Prescribing information has got to be up to date. That's important when it comes to the design of your QR codes, which I'll tell you more about. And then a really important principle which has come through. This is covered in the code as well. Two personal devices should not be used to view the prescribing information, even if the technology allows. So what we're meaning here is that if somebody is seeing and accessing, say, a presentation on their personal device, they could, of course, whip out their phone, scan a QR code on that, but that is not going to be accessible because they're using, say, their desktop, their laptop, and they're then used as a second device. So technology is going to allow it. You can easily scan something, but that is not what they are getting at. So keep that one in mind. Now, let me go through a bit more of detail. Now, to try and summarize clause 12, this is the table that I've created to try and pull everything together to give you a bit of a heads up as to what it's looking like at the moment. So I've decided to give you all the information in one, so you've got a bit of an overview on what's happening. And what we've got here is, say, these different categories. Look, we've got printed material. In the code, they also put posters and exhibition panels into the same bucket. So it's business as usual in terms of you could put the prescribing information as text, on those materials. Or here is the new one, you could put a clear and prominent QR code on that material with instructions to scan it for the prescribing information. You can as well, for something like a poster and exhibition panel, do what we've done for years. You can then state on the material that the PI is available on the stand, and then you would have a document on the stand where you've got the printed prescribing information. So a PDF or maybe a leaf piece with that prescribing information on. We've then got these two different digital categories, okay? So this is a change. This was very much, they used to be talking about materials which are online. They talked about accessing online, offline. All that sort of terminology has shifted. And we're now got to look at it. Are they accessing it on their device, or are we showing it to them? So if they're looking on their own device, of course we can put the full prescribing information on the text. But for this, because we can't have two devices, you can have that clear, prominent direct link or single click link. But here you would not put in a clear and prominent QR code. Digital material which is shown to the recipient, and they're giving examples here of an detail aid. This could be a sales representative, a face-to-face presentation. Here you can tick all of those full boxes. So here there is a new opportunity for that clear and prominent QR code. But there is one extra big statement across everything that you need to consider. And it's here in the supplementary information. You've just got to, I think, work through each scenario that you've got, because they are saying the QR code or that link, that clear, prominent, direct single click link that we all know and love, should only be provided when the user is reasonably expected to have internet access. They're not giving us explicit guidance on that. This is going to be an interesting one to interpret, but you've just got to think that one through. And for me, I think, if it's that representative who's got an e-detail aid on their iPad, if they've got an iPad with no, internet access on it, then providing, option there with QR codes and links, that is not going to be code compliant. Is my take on it. So you'd need to make sure that there's more sort of an integral link to that prescribing information in there that they can access in the absence. So that's my take on it here. Let me just give you a few more pointers on the QR code as well. Now, look, This was a QR code that I used. I was speaking at the Piper conference a few weeks ago, and this was a QR code that I bravely put on a slide. Little did I know there was a QR code expert in the room who then scrutinized my QR code. So, is this a good practice QR code? So, look, this is some guidance which they're saying about the QR code. We do not have all the information, but look, there is a very useful Q&A document around clause 12, which make sure that you have a little look at. So what they're saying is the QR code has got to be dynamic. So this should not be a static QR code. And what they're getting at here is that QR code, which then goes to a link when you scan it. You've got to make sure that the company can then update the link. So change where it's pointing to, because that principle is absolutely, you've got to make sure that people can always get to the most current version of the prescribing information. So if you've got a static one where that link is embedded, that is not going to be code compliant. And then look, I know this second one might give us some frustration, but it's up to the company to ensure the code is prominent, sufficient size, clarity, duration to allow it to be easily scanned. So far, they have not given these are the dimensions. And I think it's highly unlikely that they'll do that because, of course, the size of the materials are going to vary. So it gives you that flexibility to decide what is right and wrong. So you've got to take a pragmatic viewpoint. And that duration, again, we've got nothing to say. You must display the QR code for 1 minute to enable them to get the phone out their pocket, get their camera there to scan it. You've got to be pragmatic and decide what works best for you. I'm sure, though, if you show the QR code, say in a presentation for 10 seconds, that will not be long enough. Okay, so be sensible on it. We then it's got to be immediately apparent. And if it's not, include a statement as to where it can be found. And then you've got to make it really clear as to what they need to do with the QR code. I was able to proudly tick the box myself. I had their scan me. And here, yes, to be expected, they're saying scan the QR code for prescribing information. And if you've got the adverse event reporting in there, I would expect that to be included there as well. So, other points for you, just to sort of wrap up. So, we've got other things. This is a bit of a shift. Where not immediately apparent, promotional information must include a clear and prominent statement where the prescribing information can be found. We've had this, say, on websites and digital materials, but now they are saying this now applies to all promotional material. I personally feel it's almost going back a bit to where we were in the code a few years ago. And they do in that guidance give us what immediately apparent means. They're saying on first glance without scrolling or turning pages. So some of you might recall there used to be a comment that if you had a promotional material of more than 4 pages, you used to have to tell them on the front page as to where to find the prescribing information. So they're going along with that same sort of concept. They're not saying if it's more than 4 pages. They're now saying if it's not immediately apparent first glance, then you've got to tell them, where to find the prescribing information. So a broadened requirement there with more statements. The adverse event reporting statement, well, yes, we have had trauma with this over the last 18 months, where suddenly we all figured out that the requirement was not to provide the prescribing information to provide the adverse event statement in the prescribing information link of a digital material. It had to be on the item itself. So a lot of people are going to be very pleased to read this clause 12.6. So we have now got the opportunity to include that adverse event reporting statement in the promotional material, either by including it as text, which is what we are currently doing, or good news in the same manner as the prescribing information. But look, this is what they're saying. Their preference is to have the statement as text in the body of the material, which is no doubt what you are currently doing. And they just call out and they say that if space is limited, and they give a specific example of digital banner adverts, that has been very problematic because you're limited for space. Then they say, yeah, they think that would be a good example where you could then include that full adverse event statement in the prescribing information. But they're coming back to that same old thing. where it's not immediately apparent as to where people can find the adverse event reporting statement. Promotional material has got to include a clear and prominent statement where the adverse event reporting statement can be found. And they've gone along with the same sort of nuance. What does immediately apparent mean? It means on first glance without scrolling or turning pages. So I would always say, and I always say this, if you're designing materials, obviously the words are super important, the artwork is super important, but I think it just strengthens that concept of just stand back, look at the material. Are you going to spot where the call out to the prescribing information is, or the full prescribing information? Are you going to spot where the call out is to the adverse event reporting information? If not, rethink that with this new requirement coming through. So look, just to conclude, here I am. I'm just talking about, I think, the real key changes that everyone wants to know and that I've sort of spotted. Please don't think that this is the whole story. As saying we've got a lot more information coming through, but just to give you a bit of a feel, look, there are other changes as well that you need to unpick and have a little look at. We've got strengthening of transfer of value disclosure requirements. There are more details in clause 12 about the prescribing information, which I've not covered. We've got a little bit more money that you can spend on items for patient support, which is good news for some of you if you do those types of things. It's gone from 10 up to £15 with the VAT then on top. They've had a look at collaborative working, comments about certification, and look, with them tweaking things in the code, what we've got is that some clauses have been deleted, some clauses have now been added in. So in some places, be aware that some of the clause numbers have been renumbered. So if you've got policies, procedures, guidelines which state clauses, you need to go back through those policies, those training materials, and just double check that everything is aligned with the new 2024 code. There are also quite a lot of texts of the tweak. And then I've not even started, I'm not even going to cover this. Probably more relevant for pharmaceutical companies. But be aware, they're not just making changes to the 2024 code. They have done a huge project looking at the constitution and procedure. It's not the most go-to document, I have to say. It's, if we think the code is dry, this one is super dry, if I can describe it like this. But this is the back end. This is about the governance. This is how the complaints process works. And I do just want to flag that there is a new abridged complaints procedure which has been brought in. And the whole idea of that is trying to make complaints go through the process a bit quicker. So if you know that you have got a breach of the code, and if it fits certain criteria, and if you agree that, yeah, we know we've got that wrong, and you accept the breaches, then it'll go through more quickly. This is the hope anyway, and the fines are going to be less, or fines, actually, administrative charges will be less. So look, that's as much as I've got to say at this stage. Peter, that I can see comments in the chat. I'm aware of comments in the chat. I'm aware of questions there. So shall I hand over to you to let me know what comments have we got? And yeah, let's have a bit
Great.
of a discussion.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Jane. So just for now, can we just lose the slides and we'll just have the Q&A
Yes.
between the two of us? Um,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking several things, one of which is good heavens, some of this is going to cause some discussion, particularly around the QR codes. Unless I'm being a bit stupid, there's some real sort of oddities in there, I think, personally, in terms of practicalities. I'll be interested to see the comments coming in from the audience, several of which are around QR codes. So can I just shout out to the audience and go, please, we may not get to all your questions, but we're going to have a quarter of an hour or so, 10 minutes, 15 minutes on questions. Chuck us as much as you like. Questions, observations, comments, and we'll try and address them. I wanted to ask, I wanted to start, since it's my party, just with maybe highlighting or stressing. You mentioned, I just found it, clause 5.2, the high standards, the all company
Yes.
personnel point. And I'm just intrigued about that because this has come up in previous presentations, so on, stressing the fact that it applies to agencies and freelancers and so on and so forth. But they've strengthened that clause. And I
Yeah.
just wonder, can you I suppose there's an obvious reason for that, which is there must be problems out there. I just wonder whether, just for a moment, you can just put some more context on that, because bearing in mind the audience today, many of whom will work on the agency side or whatever, I do find it interesting that they've strengthened that, which I'm assuming is because there are more problems happening. Am I right to assume that? What can you give us some sort of a sense of what's going on that front?
Yeah, we are getting cases, obviously, which are coming through, where I always say co-compliance is absolutely a partnership. A pharma company is only as good as its supporting partners, which are going to be, you lovely agencies out there and things. So we have got cases, that one just struck a massive chord. I think part of it, and I do wonder if there is another case coming through, because we've always had that sales representatives have to have a high level of ethical conduct in the discharge of their duties. So that has always been there for sales representatives. But it's interesting that they've in fact got rid of the rep clause and they've pulled it into this 5.2. So you're right. I wonder if there's a case coming through. We've got a lag of about 12, 18 months for some of these cases coming through. Okay,
Right.
where a company's actually gone, okay, yes, that was an in-company employee, maybe somebody in medical, for example, and they have disputed the fact, that they have not been in breach of a high standards clause because it was aimed at sales representatives. So that would be my hunch at it, that there is a case coming through. But I think they just want to send out a really clear message that it's not just about pharma companies. This is as much as all their partners, people by a contract. So this could be a speaker speaking at a meeting for you. It could be a chair at a meeting. Plenty of breaches around those recently as well, but also the third parties. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
That's what I'm interested in. The third parties. It's like, I'm in the agency or the freelancer. Look at me. I'm working on a project for X sort of thing.
Yep,
Can be in
yep,
breach and can lead to an awful lot of problems. There's a
yes.
couple of questions came in, and one came in earlier, which is sort of in this direction. Whether so let's pick up Angela's question. Our pharma companies can become more strict on their third-party vendors, demonstrating they have the ABPI training. What proof is acceptable that they've got that training? And an earlier question was, are they being clearer about what an acceptable level of training is?
Yeah, yeah. So are companies getting stricter? I find absolutely yes, they are. So I train a huge number of pharma companies and an awful lot of agencies. And the question that always comes up, and I always provide, is they always say, can we have a certificate? Absolutely. And I hear increasingly that companies, it's not just enough to say, yeah, we've been trained 2 years ago. They're wanting to see up to date evidence, that companies have been trained. I came across one company that is now saying they need proof of training. They've been trained in the last 6 months. Quite often it will be an annual thing, but thinking crumbs. Now, have you been trained in the last 6 months? So, that's one company there.
And sorry to cut through,
Mm,
Jayne, but is there a
mm,
requirement to be trained at a certain level, or do you just have to have a certificate
no.
off the internet that says you've done it?
Yeah,
And I know we're opening a bit of a minefield there, and I'm not trying to sort of put words in your mouth, but it seems there's a difficulty there. If they're not going to say
absolutely.
they've got to be trained to a certain level, or as you as a trainer, you don't have to get a certification
No,
or whatever you want to call it for your training. I think
no.
surely that just leaves a bit of a minefield in there, doesn't it?
Potentially it does. Yes. And yes, training standards certainly vary out there, but there is no level to say that, right, the trainers need to, meet this level.
Okay.
So of course, you just do your due diligence on the trainer, you know, how are they keeping themselves up to date, just like you would in any other situation. But yeah, there's no standard because
Okay, I
people are
find
different.
that a real problem, I must admit. But and just to pick up on one more point, you mentioned that typically at the moment, I think I'm right in saying you're saying 12 to 18 months for a case to go through. Is that what you're saying at the moment? And then the
Yeah.
abridged system is to try and speed that up. Yeah, it's a personal soapbox to me that, and I've been very public about this in the past about how ridiculously long this takes. And if you go, and then the process can then be exacerbated by then there's an appeal against it, and you can find out a long way down the line. And in the digital world, if not any other world, that can cause lots of problems. Just have you got any sense of how well that abridged complaint process is going to work? And I presume this was tied to a question early on from somebody, but I've lost it. Whether they're going to be distinguishing between so-called serious and non-serious. not member complaints, not and so on and so forth. Do you have any sense of how that's going to work in practice, and will it really reduce the time taken for processing this?
So I really hope it will. And I'm saying that because I'm hoping it's going to improve things for the PMCPA. At the moment, they've got a massive, massive backlog of cases. They've not told us how many cases, but I know that there is a massive backlog sitting in the wings that they're still processing. So I really hope that this is a pragmatic way, that if the company looks at an alleged breach, and they give some examples like the black triangle has gone orange rather than black. Let's say the click-through link to the prescribing information is broken. So if we've got something which is, it's still important, but in the big scale, it is more, it's a little less patient safety impact, if I can describe it that like that, then they are going to put those through. But if they spot something which then the black triangle is missing, for example, they're then going to say, okay, that is a more serious issue. So we're then going to revert that case back into the full complaints procedure and we will go through. So we're going to have to see if it's a bed down, how it goes. They're only going to start this new process from complaints that come in from the 1st of October. They're not going to go back retrospectively to try and clear the backlog. And I think it's one of those we'll have to watch this space. And then it's whether companies are willing to say, yep, we agree, we have breached. Because if they come back and say, no, we haven't breached, it would then go back into the full complaint system.
Okay,
So
okay.
we've
I
got
guess there's probably
ifs
a
and
lot
buts.
we could get bogged down in there. It just winds me up a little bit. But we've only got, inevitably, we're going to run out of time today. And I'm very aware that we'll leave a lot of people frustrated. We've got loads of questions, which is absolutely brilliant. Please keep them coming, everybody. But I wanted to highlight the QR code
Yes.
point. We've had several questions coming in, people confused. I'm certainly confused. I think a lot of the language leaves room for all sorts of problems later on. Someone's picking up on and you made the point about the reasonable internet access and so on. Several people, myself included, I don't understand this two device point
Yeah.
because materials can be reused and whatever. And if I'm looking at something that was produced as a print document on a computer and I'm looking at a QR code and I get my phone out, it's all of a sudden in a print. That just doesn't work as far as I can see. But am I missing the point?
No, I think it's fair. Now, when the consultation came out, gosh, the wording in there was the most confusing wording, in my opinion, ever, and a lot of people agreed with that. So I read 12.1 and go, oh, at least I can unpick this one. But you're right. So let me think. Hopefully, printed materials is more obvious with the QR codes. There it is, printed exhibition stand with your QR code on. Person can get their phone out and scan that, which then allows you to have the QR code. I think where the challenge comes is if you did you want to check something on that, Peter?
Well, just to pin you down on that one, there's a lot of printed material like that that is also then and it's conveniently available in PDF format or something. So
Yes.
just download it here. I don't see how that works.
Yes.
Am I missing the
And
point?
this is where the challenge comes. So if you've got a material which is being used across print and digital, then this is where you then need to sit and think about, right, when that is printed, then, and this is say, I'll use the exhibition stand as an example, as a simple one. When that is printed, then people can use the QR code because they're only using one device. If, however, you took that panel, put exactly the same information, but maybe put it into a presentation, okay, that is then the material being shown to, the digital material is shown to a recipient in person. So then you are showing it to them in a slide deck. They are seeing it, but they're not using their own personal device because they're just looking at it on your device, which then means you can get out your phone because we've only got one device and they can then scan it. But if that material was then part of a webinar, okay? So it's online on your website, and they are then watching that webinar on their laptop, on their desktop. Then they could not get their phone out and scan the QR code because then they've got their desktop looking at it, and then they would have their phone And so this is this principle. You cannot allow people to access it when they're using two of their devices.
I just think that's bonkers. I mean, it just doesn't work. So let's and I want a whole flipping hour on this because I just don't get
Yeah,
this. And
yeah,
I'm pleased to see that a number of other people in the audience aren't getting it either. So it's just not me
yeah,
being stupid.
yeah.
There are a couple of flippant comments about, amazing using a QR code in 2024. They have been around a while, sort of thing. What else can we pick up on in the last few moments? There was something, sorry, that was going through my head and now it stopped. Oh, just actually, no, actually, sticking with QR codes. If a printed, let's just take a printed piece, yeah,
Yeah.
we can now. What you're saying, if I understand, is it can just have a QI code on now. Somebody asked a question. If it's printed and it's got its QI code, it does not need the printed PI text. Is that right?
That's right. So if
It's
you
as
wish
simple
to,
as that, yeah.
it is, yes.
So long
And
as you don't then turn it into a PDF and stick it on a machine. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's
Okay.
purely
Okay.
print. Yeah. So it can be, it's an either or. So you can do it, put the whole of the PII on it, or through a clear and prominent QR code with instructions to scan it, the prescribing information, then all the other caveats as well about, size and everything they're going for and the location as well. So yeah, if you wish to save you having to reprint materials constantly when the prescribing information is updated, there is now that opportunity from the 1st of October to replace that with a QR code if it's going to be a print material.
Okay, okay, there's a whole thing. A couple of people, I think, are picking up on the fact, and again, it's just a practical question. I just wonder because you've stressed it, and I get what you're stressing, but before the 1st of October, you can't do some of this stuff, and I don't know. I mean, how RP? I don't know. Is that something we need to stress, or if some theoretically, if somebody did something, put that QR code on today, they could be caught up. I mean, I suppose I'm just trying to get my head around that and think, is that really going to happen? I don't know. Have you seen people go so fast off the blocks that they get caught out before the code starts again, sort of thing, in the
Yeah,
historical terms?
because this was all mooted in the consultation, companies have certainly started to embrace behind the scenes far more
And
QR
think
codes
about it,
coming through.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've certainly had questions, around this. Is it okay, now to do the QR code and take off the PI? But I say, if somebody spots it and if you've switched over that quickly, just don't jump the gun.
It could be a problem.
It
Okay,
could
so
be a
just
problem.
my final question, and maybe just a comment from your point of view, and I don't know quite how much you want to say on this, but there was a big consultation exercise for this, as I saw it.
Yeah.
Um, it was it's true to say that not that the launch of the code has been somewhat delayed, presumably because the consultation exercise and yada, and we've been waiting for this code, I think, since something like March, April time.
Yes, we have.
Um,
Yeah.
and I got the very clear impression but I'm not quite sure where I could find it now. But I've had a very clear impression that there is a recognition that there needs to be a lot more consultation and an update coming next year, sort of thing. Am I missing the point of that message, or is that what's happening? And can you provide any sort of context to what might be happening there?
Absolutely. So what they said, they had more than 3,000 comments on it. Some of the comments were on the consultation. Some were comments just about the general application of the code and picking up other things that they wanted to be considered and changed it in the code. So with such a huge amount, what they've done, they've gone, right, we're going to look at the consultation because we need to communicate on these things. We've made decisions on the consultation. Not everything has gone through in the consultation because it opened up a can of worms. And so there are some areas that they were looking at, which they say they're going to come back at and do another consultation on. So, in a nutshell, expect another whole process all over again. I don't know the timings, but I would expect 2025 we'll have another consultation. So we might have another code in 2025. It might push into 2026. That's all unknown at the moment. But yes, things will come back on the table for discussion. Things like medical education. We're hoping to get a Q&A out from them as well, but signatory roles and probably a whole host of other stuff that people raised in their comments. So yeah, watch this space for more fun and games. Certainly I'd say a consultation next year is what what is being talked about. So you're spot on, Peter.
Okay, okay. Well, on that positive note, I'm going to say a huge thank you to you. I'm going to thank you to the audience. We've got a very large audience. It's great that you've been involved, and I love the fact you're sending so many questions and comments. We are collecting everything at this end, um, and and um, and I would encourage you, at the end of the day, to follow up with Jayne directly. Jayne, you're very happy to be contacted on LinkedIn or whatever, and so on and so forth. And I know you run your courses and so on. So please, what I wanted to do today was, I think, what we've just done, which is have you come along and just highlight some of the areas we need to look at and think about. Give us food for thought. My own personal view is the QR code situation is going to turn into another nightmare where how long we have a consultation about that and what the problems are, I don't know. But good luck to all of you out there that are trying to grapple with this. Um, the recording of this is on NetworkPharma TV. Huge thank you to everybody for coming and joining us. MedComms Networking, or follow hashtag MedComms. Talk to me if I can help. But just for today, and everybody online, we've got another few minutes to the top of the hour, so we'll carry on going. But for the purposes of the recording, I'm going to say thank you, Jayne, and give everybody a little wave. Thank you very much. Take care. Cheers. Bye.